New Orleans never sleeps, they say. But those like me who wander through the early hours know the truth. The city doesn't sleep because it's afraid of its own dreams. The streets bear the scars of centuries of sin, music, and blood. At every corner, the lit lanterns blend with the mist crawling in from the Mississippi, and they seem more like funeral candles than guides for travelers. And it's in this setting, between the melancholic jazz drifting out of the bars and the drunken screams echoing through the alleys, that I feel my hunger awaken, like a monster within a monster. Hunger doesn't ask, it demands. It's not just the desire to drink, but the inevitable need to tear through the distance between me and the mortals who wander carelessly, as if the night belongs to them. With every breath I hear, every heartbeat, it's like a bell tolling inside my mind. People imagine that a vampire feeds purely for pleasure or lust. They're wrong. There are nights when the hunger is so intense, it goes beyond any notion of choice. It's like a constant drumbeat, a voiceless call. I could easily throw myself upon any of those crossing the French Quarter, with their easy laughter and unsteady steps, and leave them drained in the gutter. But something deeper, darker, pulses inside me tonight, as if city blood is no longer enough, as if something far beyond the city is calling me. New Orleans, with its artificial lights and lawless life, begins to feel repulsive. It's as though every electric lamp is a miniature sun trying to repel my presence. The music that once drew me in now sounds like mockery. The smells of alcohol, sweat, and spices, which were always a delicious blend, masking the scent of blood, now seem like nothing more than a smokescreen. I feel like a stranger in a place I considered my territory for decades. Then I realize, it's not the city that has changed, it's me. There's a force, a silent calling, pulling me from these familiar alleys and leading me beyond, outward, toward the deepest shadows. It's not a voice, not a sound, but it pulses within me, echoing in rhythm with my hunger. The more I let it guide me, the more I see the city fading behind me, as if it never existed. And as I delve further into this passage, I get the feeling I'm no longer walking of my own will. The night, which was always my servant, now takes me by the hand like a dominant lover, determined to lead me where I would never dare go alone. And as I drift farther away, the weight of the silence grows. The human world, with its petty sins and fleeting pleasures, vanishes. All that remains are my sharpened senses and the unsettling premonition that I'm heading towards something that should never be touched. New Orleans grew more and more distant, like a blurred memory behind the thickening fog. I walked toward the unknown, guided by a force I couldn't understand. The narrow alleys and the sound of saxophones gave way to empty streets, then to dirt roads, until civilization itself seemed to fade away. The air began to change. From humid and heavy with artificial perfumes, it began to exhale a more primal scent of rotting wood, crushed leaves, and stagnant water. It was the breath of the swamp. The ground beneath my feet became uneven, a treacherous mix of mud and roots. The silence was so profound that even the insects seemed to hesitate to break it. Only the sound of my breathing and the insistent pounding of hunger echoed within me. The moon, once partially hidden by clouds, now emerged in full, spilling its pale light over the black surface of the waters. Unsteady reflections seemed to dance, as if invisible hands stirred the liquid mirrors to confuse me. It wasn't just the surroundings that were changing. Inside me, there was a growing restlessness. With each step forward, my hunger mingled with something else, an ancestral calling, as though the twisted roots around me whispered forbidden secrets. I no longer knew if it was my will leading me, or if I was the one being led, a puppet of a force far older than any vampire. The swamp, felt alive. At times, the silence was broken by small sounds. The plop of a gas bubble escaping the mud, the snap of a branch breaking in the distance, the rapid flutter of unseen wings. But there was something more. Something that moved in rhythm with me, always just beyond the reach of sight. A pursuer or a guide? I couldn't tell. My senses, sharp as they were being deceived by this place. That's when I realized the swamp wasn't just calling me, it was accepting me. And that was more terrifying than any rejection could ever be. The first time I felt its presence, it wasn't with my eyes, it was with my skin. The air grew heavy, saturated with electricity, like just before a storm. The humidity clung to my face, and each drop seemed to carry a whisper, as if the water itself were trying to warn me. That's when I realized I was no longer alone. Something was watching me from the darkness, hidden behind the curtain of mist rising over the water. My vampiric instincts screamed in alarm, that familiar sensation of being hunted that we know so well. But at the same time, there was something different about it. A metallic tang in the air, mixed with the scent of wet fur and torn flesh. With every step, the muck seemed to pull at my feet, as if the swamp itself wanted to hold me still, exposed, vulnerable. The slow, deliberate crackling of branches behind me confirmed what I already knew. Something was circling me, and it wasn't human. When I saw it for the first time, the moon slipped behind a cloud, as if refusing to shine on such an abomination. Two yellow eyes emerged from the darkness, glowing like burning coals. A massive body, covered in dark fur, rose from the shallow water, scattering mud and blood. Muscles pulsed beneath taut skin, and every movement was accompanied by a grotesque sound. Joints popping, bones shifting into places they shouldn't. It was a hybrid, not just a wolf, not just a beast. There was something far too human in its features, and yet far too monstrous to be mistaken for any man. Its jaw opened, revealing long fangs, not just animalistic, but irregular, like human teeth unnaturally stretched to impossible lengths. Its hot breath reeked of rot, and yet there was a sweetness to it, almost intoxicating, the kind of scent that paralyzes just before the bite. It advanced slowly, like something savoring fear. My instincts commanded me to strike, but my body remained still, mesmerized by the sight of a creature that should not exist. I, a vampire, a being of shadows and damnation, stood face to face with something that looked as though it had been spit out from the very bowels of hell. The beast didn't roar. It didn't scream. It merely let out a low, dragging sound, something between a human moan and the growl of a wounded animal. Suddenly, the moon slipped free from the clouds, and its silver light bathed the creature. That was when I saw the details that froze my blood. There were burn scars across its skin, silver brands etched in lines, spreading across its chest and arms. This wasn't just a monster. It was a victim, transformed into something worse, shaped by pain and fury. And in that instant, I understood. What had emerged from the swamp wasn't hunting for blood. It was hunting for vengeance. Time compressed into a single second. The beast lunged with a speed that defied its massive size, tearing through the swamp water as if it were nothing but smoke. I barely had time to react. My body spun instinctively, and I felt the air rip as her claws sliced past my face, severing a strand of hair that drifted like ash into the night. The force of her movement sent the mud surging in waves, and the swamp stirred as though the earth itself protested the battle that had begun. My fist, hardened by the eternity of the night, struck her chest with a blow that would have shattered any human, but not her. The creature only staggered half a step, then unleashed a roar that was neither beast nor man, but pure accumulated pain, as if every scar carved into her flesh cried out all at once. The vibration of that roar rattled through my bones, and I felt something I rarely did. Genuine fear. With each step the creature took toward me, the swamp floor seemed to tremble, as if the ancestral spirits of those foul waters vibrated in ecstasies at the sight of my end. I, who had once been shadow and predator of men, was now reduced to a blood-soaked rag, moments away from being devoured by something that should never have existed. Her eyes burned with a feverish glow, a mixture of hunger and triumph, and the moonlight carved her monstrous silhouette, half lupine beast, half something even more profane. I tried to rise, but my legs refused to obey. The bitter taste of blood burned in my mouth, and with each breath, or the mockery of one, my vision blurred further. She raised one of her deformed hands, silver claws still dripping with my blood, and in that moment, I could feel, not just see, the inevitability of the final blow. It was as if death itself had descended into the swamp, cloaked in moss and rotting bones, to collect me. But in that instant, at the edge of the abyss, something dormant within me awoke, a primal instinct, ancient, raw, a fury that even centuries of restraint could not contain. It wasn't merely vampiric, it was something beyond. My body twisted in spasms, bones contorting, muscles tearing through flesh in search of a new form. I felt the beast inside me roar, seizing control. My fangs extended further, my claws became blades of pure savagery, and a howl, not human, not vampire, tore from my throat. The creature froze for a second, startled. That moment was all I needed. With an animalistic leap, driven by hybrid fury, I attacked with a violence I never knew I possessed. My claws plunged into her chest, ripping through flesh and bone until I reached the cursed, pulsing heart. The beast howled, struck me with brutal force, but I felt no pain, only the necessity to destroy. With a final wrenching crack, I tore her heart free and lifted it toward the moon, which seemed to bear silent witness to the offering. The creature collapsed into the muddy waters, her body still twitching until stillness claimed her completely. Silence returned, heavy, almost sacred. I stood soaked in blood and filth, breathing as if every breath was a rebirth, knowing I had not emerged unscathed. Something within me had changed forever. The inner beast had awakened, and there was no turning back. I limped toward the edge of the swamp, hearing the frogs timidly resume their croaking, as if the forest itself sensed the cycle of horror had for now come to a close. But inside me, the beast's whisper didn't fade. It was clear. The night hadn't ended in victory, but in a promise. The promise that the hybrid now walked the swamps of New Orleans, fated to face even darker forces. And so, as the moon descended on the horizon, I understood. The night was not my enemy. It was my home. But the true terror was what I had become.